Little Johnny's teacher was starting a lesson on multi-syllable words. She thought it would be a good idea to ask a few children for examples of words with more than one syllable. "Jane, do you know any multi-syllable words?" After thinking for a while, Jane proudly responded, "Mon-day." "Great, Jane, that has 2 syllables. Mon-day. Does anyone else know any other words?" I do, me, answered little Johnny. Knowing little Johnny's dirtier sense of humor, she chose Steve instead. "Okay, Steve, what's your word?" "Saturday," Steve said. "Great, that has 3 syllables." Not wanting to be outdone, little Johnny said, "I know a 4-syllable word, choose me." Not thinking he could do any harm with such a big word, the teacher reluctantly said, "Okay, Johnny, what's your 4-syllable word?" Little Johnny said proudly, "Mas, ter, ba, tion." Shocked, the teacher, trying to keep her composure, said, "Wow, Johnny, 4 syllables, that's definitely a mouthful." Little Johnny smirked. "No, ma'am, you're thinking of something else. And it's only 2 syllables." The judge says, "Please tell me why you're seeking a divorce." John says, "Because I live in a 2-story house." The judge says, "What kind of a reason is that?" "What's the matter with a 2-story house?" John says. "I'll tell you what the matter is. One story is, I have a headache, and the other story is, it's that time of the month." 3 women were sitting around talking about their sex lives. The first said, "I think my husband's like a championship golfer. He spent the last 10 years perfecting his stroke." The second woman said, "My husband's like the winner of the motor racing Grand Prix. Every time we get into bed, he gives me several hundred exciting laps." The third woman was silent until she was asked, "Tell us about your husband." She thought for a moment and said, "My husband's like an Olympic gold medalist for the 400 meters. How so? He's got his time down to under 45 seconds. After a fulfilling life with the now dead prince, Cinderella happily sits upon her rocking chair, watching the world go by from her front porch, with a cat named Bob for companionship. One sunny afternoon, out of nowhere, appeared the fairy godmother. Cinderella said, "Fairy godmother, what are you doing here after all these years?" The fairy godmother replied, "Cinderella, you have lived an exemplary life since I last saw you. Is there anything for which your heart still yearns?" Cinderella was taken aback, overjoyed, and after some thoughtful consideration she uttered her first wish. The prince was wonderful, but not much of an investor. I'm living hand-to-mouth on my disability checks, and I wish I were wealthy beyond comprehension. Instantly her rocking chair turned into solid gold. Cinderella said, "Ooh, thank you, fairy godmother." The fairy godmother replied, "It is the least that I can do. What do you want for your second wish?" Cinderella looked down at her frail body and said, "I wish I were young and full of the beauty and youth I once had." At once her wish became reality, and her beautiful young visage returned. Cinderella felt stirrings inside of her that had been dormant for years. And then the fairy godmother spoke once more. "You have one more wish. What shall it be?" Cinderella looks over to the frightened cat in the corner and says, "I wish for you to transform Bob, my old cat, into a kind and handsome young man." Magically, Bob suddenly underwent so fundamental a change in his biological makeup that when he stood before her, he was a man so beautiful the likes of him neither she nor the world had ever seen. The fairy godmother said, "Congratulations, Cinderella. Enjoy your new life." With a blazing shock of bright blue electricity, the fairy godmother was gone as suddenly as she appeared. For a few eerie moments, Bob and Cinderella looked into each other's eyes. Cinderella sat, breathless, gazing at the most beautiful, stunningly perfect man she had ever seen. Then Bob walked over to Cinderella, who sat transfixed in her rocking chair. He held her close in his young, muscular arms. He leaned in close, blowing her golden hair with his warm breath as he whispered, "I bet now you're sorry you had me castrated."